Hey, how you guys doing? It's producer from Brothers Comics. Welcome to the Who Day Over 40 podcast for long time, long suffering Cincinnati Bengals fans. Who Day, everybody. So we've turned the calendar to June. Bengals are in their offseason program, which we'll talk about here momentarily. And as we continue through the offseason, we're doing these 4 packs of questions or 4 downs worth of questions to look at some of the things before the Bengals go into that dark period here after OTAs. That is literally unless your team is eliminated from playoff contention or they're just terrible. I mean, even when they're terrible, you can look towards draft picks. But man, those freaking 6 weeks that the NFL goes completely dark, where there's no OTAs between before like the Hall of Fame game and teams report to mini camp or training camp, are the absolute worst. So we'll just have this content going week to week here as we get into the off season, have some special guests on as well to talk about, the Bengals before we get the 24-25 season started. So let's get this one started. Who Dey? So the Bengals have some news going on. There was a couple of big events this past weekend with Bengal players. Logan Wilson had his second annual softball tournament extravaganza. I'm sure he's raising money for some organization or something, but I don't really know what it is. I know it's in my hometown of Dayton. This is the second year for it. They had a lot of current players there as well as former players. Like a really big deal for Logan Wilson and whatever charity that he's running with. So that's a good thing for him. That's a good thing for Dayton. Dayton needs all kinds of positive press, and him bringing that tournament there is not a bad idea. Also, in a kind of weird situation, Joe Mixon, former Bengal now, and Jamar Chase had their football camp together. It was for little kids up to, I think through high school. But Joe Mixon back in town. He had his own camp there here recently, and then this one here with Jamar Chase. Now Joe Mixon not with the Bengals because he signed with the Houston Texans. Jamar Chase in Cincinnati, but not with the Bengals, which we talked about last week, as he's not attending OTAs and training on his own down here in Florida. So a little bit weird, I would imagine. It'll be interesting to see if Jamar shows up to minicamp this week. I'm anticipating that he doesn't because it's just all contract stuff with him. He'll report for the mandatory mini camp, which I do believe is the next week, not this week coming. And, he'll show up there and hopefully, he'll practice and get in sync with his bestie and quarterback, Joe Burrow. So the Bengals offseason program does continue into this week. The phase 3 portion, which we had hinted at last week. Remember that everybody's going to be able to run across, run defense against one another in 7-on-7, 11-on-11s. The helmets will come out. People are actually getting an opportunity to, face off instead of running against air and shorts. They'll get the little bit of pads on, get the helmets on, get a chance to see Joe Burrow, throwing against competition as it's just throwing into open spaces. See how that arm is, or that wrist is progressing. Can he still fit it into those tight windows? Those all types of questions can, start to be answered here. We'll start to get limited actual reporting from minicamp once we get into this phase because they're starting to implement, some things into their program and they don't want that on camera for everybody. So we'll just be relying on the reporters that are actually there. But yeah, this is a big time for the Bengals. And like I said, the mandatory mini. Let's see who shows up. Like I said, does Jamar show up for the mandatory mini camp? Again, teams can fine players for not showing up to these mandatory sessions. The Ravens just had Lamar Jackson skip the mandatory sessions for him. It cost him like $750,000. The Bengals, in the history and past, it really depends on the player if they were really enforcing finding those players or not. I can't imagine that they would find Jamar if he doesn't show up for this mandatory camp. Obviously, T. Higgins will not be there because he's not under contract. But other players missing from the OTAs besides T, Sheldon Rankins, the defensive tackle that they signed from the Texans, he hasn't been there for any of the OTAs. And then Trent Brown, the proposed starting right tackle, has also not shown up to any of the mini camps, which is a little bit weird. It's you would think that he'd be there, try to get some uh I don't know, chemistry with the offensive line, get himself adjusted to being in Cincinnati and all of that. So there could be something going on with him. I don't really know, but it's kind of weird for him to not be there because he is a proposed starter. And maybe he could even actually even lose his job to Amarius Mims, at the start of training camp when that first depth chart comes out. I don't think that'll be the case, but it's a little bit weird that both of them haven't been there for these OTAs. But hopefully they show up for these mandatory minis next week. All right. So 4 downs of off-season questions as we get the look here. The week kind of started off with question number one, and I wanted to jump on it first. There's a lot of news out there with other wide receivers signing deals. Jalen Waddle down here in Miami here recently signed a deal. So it puts T right back into the forefront. But before Waddle had actually signed his deal, T had recorded like a video on that I Am Athlete show, which used to be a really good podcast, but it's turned into absolute trash. But that's a different podcast in and of itself. But it's about his situation in Cincinnati. He looked, kind of sad and remorseful. It kind of looked like a, I'm out video. This is me saying goodbye to you kind of situation. But he's saying that he wants, to stay in Cincinnati. He's grown so much while being in Cincinnati, and he'd like to stay. So here's the first down question. How do you feel about players that say they want to stay in a particular area, but don't want to come off the money to make that happen? Everybody wants to stay with money, but in a fairly hard cap league that the NFL is, there's only a limited amount of money. Once you start to pay a quarterback, like all of these things come into play, and so teams have to snip around the edges. A lot of people are like, oh, well, the Bengals could pay two people because the Dolphins are now paying Jalen Waddle and Cheetah. Yeah, but Cheetah's on his way out. His next cap hit on his contract is insane. The Dolphins aren't taking that on, and the Bengals are trying to be physically responsible, knowing that they have other deals coming up. And do they want to pay two wide receivers? Why, number one money? Jamar's going to break the bank on whatever deal that he gets. Obviously everybody's waiting on Justin Jefferson to set the market, but or CD Lamb. But those are going to be huge deals, and the Bengals aren't going to be able to carry on another one of those deals. And so they probably have a number that they'd feel comfortable paying T. Higgins, but he and his agent probably aren't comfortable with that number. So how do you feel? You want to make this happen. The agent works for you. You know, you probably could come to some sort of agreement with the Bengals to stay there if that's what's important to you. The other side of that is, why should I be giving back money that I've earned that some other team is going to give me? And that does have its downfalls for the players. A lot of times when players get to this point where T. Higgins is, teams that have money aren't typically very good. So you're sacrificing a good situation with a good quarterback, a winning team at this point in time to go, do what Jesse Bates did. Yeah, he's making like $18 million a year, and he's an all-pro safety now with the Falcons, but they're nowhere near getting to the playoffs at all. And by the time they get to that point, more than likely he's going to be near the end of his contract, and they'll be thinking about moving on from him. So I've kind of gone back and forth in my history with this. I kind of like, what, if the player wants to stay, you know, take a discount, take a little bit less money and you can make that happen. But also, like, again, the NFL is owners are so disloyal to the players, and if they tear an ACL or anything like that, those contracts are completely fugazi and they can get out of it without paying any money. So yeah, T, get your money. I would hope it is in Cincinnati for sure, but I understand the nature of this business, and as players become older, they understand that this is a business too, and they have to take care of themselves and their families above any loyalty that they might have to the team. Second down, y'all. So Tyler Boyd is gone. He signed on with the Tennessee Titans. And so now the Bengals do not actually have a true slot receiver. They have some people that have played the slot or can play the slot, but it's not like Tyler Boyd, who was a slot specific player, had the trust of Joe Burrow, a third down demon, what all the, attributes you want to give to a third down wide receiver. Tyler Boyd was all of that. But now that he's moved on, there's really a position open in that slot. And, there's a lot of candidates that actually take that position, but who's actually going to be the one to do it? So that's question that, number two and second down. Who assumes that slot role? Is it Mike Gesicki, tight end that they signed from the Patriots? He's not an inline tight end. He's just a big, slow wide receiver, but in out of the slot, he can really, putting Mike Hilton on him, let's say, or some other cornerback or a linebacker, it's an automatic mismatch because he's so freaking tall. So does he go into the slot? Does Ricky Jermaine Burton go into the slot? That's an opportunity for him. But I don't think that he's a slot receiver exclusively. He's kind of like a slot the same way Jamar is a slot. If he could learn to play the slot and get himself into some mismatch situations, yeah, that's great. But he's not going to be primarily playing his position in the slot. And he is a full number two down the field wide receiver. I don't know that that's going to be the case. He may play some snaps there, but it's not going to be that many. Charlie Jones, last year's wide receiver draft pick, exclusively a slot, allegedly, even though that's not what he played at. He went to Purdue. It's not what he played there. He played on the outside. Bengals automatically were like, yeah, you're going to learn how to play the slot. Then he comes in, he gets hurt, he returns punts. So you have to worry about that part of him as well. But I'm not 100% sure if that's going to be his position. And I would say he actually could be a little bit on the bubble if some other people come in and play well. I wouldn't be surprised if Charlie Jones is on the bubble a little bit. Trent Irwin has the trust of Joe Burrow. He's played in the slot before, limited a little bit athletically for sure, but he's done it. He's played the position. He's got the experience of doing it. Or is it TBD? Maybe there's some wide receiver that they haven't signed that's floating out there as a veteran free agent that maybe can come in and take over those slot snaps that Tyler Boyd did. It's going to be an interesting camp battle, I think. I'd probably say Gasecki is the leader in the clubhouse, and then they're able to run two tight end sets, with Drew Sample as the inline tight end, and then Gasecki in the slot, and then you still have your wide receivers out there as well. It'll be very interesting to see how that plays out in camp. And again, Gasecki's got to get the trust and earn the trust of Joe Burrow. Irv Smith came in. People were like, yeah, Irv Smith, he can do really, well. He's got athleticism, but he never had Joe Burrow's trust. And that's why he didn't do very well here. And that's why he signed with the Chiefs in the offseason. The first of these 1 year tight ends that didn't go out and get a bigger deal after playing with Joe Burrow. So let's see what happens with Mike Gesicki as that tight end, that signs that 1 year deal looking to get a big one the following season. Third down, y'all. So Zack Taylor announced in the offseason here that he's going to be stepping back from his play caller role as running the offense, needed to assuming more duties as the head coach for the Bengals. And so new offensive coordinator Dan Pitcher is going to be taking over a lot of the play calling. And you kind of have to wonder a couple of questions. I ain't put the one on here, but I'm thinking about it now. One, is turning over your offense to a brand new offensive coordinator a good idea? You have a championship team with a championship quarterback. You're giving that offense over to somebody that hasn't, fully called plays before in the NFL. And that could be a little bit of a concern. Two, how do you think Zack Taylor did as a play caller? It seems, and again, let's state for the record here, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. I'm just somebody that watches the games on the couch and can point out things that are obvious to everybody. An offensive coordinator in the NFL who's called plays and done all that knows more about football than I have in my, tiny pinky finger. So any critique of Zack Taylor or even, Dan Pitcher is primarily just based on fandom. And so as a fan, sometimes it seems like Zach gets on these hot and cold runs. Sometimes like you can tell he's got the book, man, and the team is dealing, the plays are working, like it's all there. And then other times, I think he suffers from being a little bit conservative sometimes, and then being overly aggressive other times. He's a weird play caller at points. We was just watching the Chiefs game from 2 seasons ago in Cincinnati where the Bengals won the AFC North, and you had those fourth down plays inside the 1 yard line, and they were really saved by penalties on the Chiefs from that becoming an absolute disaster for the Bengals. And, overly aggressive in that situation. And other times, he gets really conservative. It's like, oh, I don't want to put the ball in the air in this situation when you have Joe Burrow. Let that man cook. Like if you trust Joe Burrow, and you should, if there's comes times where there's an opportunity to throw the ball, even though you don't want to, maybe that's the time to do it instead of turning around and handing it off on a play that you know is going to get snuffed and lead to, whatever downs and punts, and then having the defense have to defend at the end of a game. So I think he runs hot and cold. It'll be interesting to see if he's able to step back from this fully. A lot of head coaches say they're going to step back from it, but then micromanage the person that's supposed to be doing that job to the point where they can't do the job, and all they're doing is really just filtering in whatever the offensive, the head coach wants, which is kind of what Brian Callahan did. Yeah, he had some say in the offense, but really that was Zack Taylor calling the plays and him just kind of rubber stamping and approving it. So yeah, I'm up and down about Zach, man. Those second down and 10 runs. Again, as a fan, those are infuriating. It's second and long runs, man. Oh, first down, yeah, you threw the ball, got 2 or 3 yards. Second down, it's on 2nd and 7, 2nd and 8, run. Oh my God! And then you put in these 3rd and 6 and 7s where Joe Burrow has to be a magician to get the team to get a first down. So yeah, maybe pitcher's a little bit more creative. Maybe has a hot hand for doing this straight out the jump when they start that game against the Patriots. But yeah, it's a little concerning having a first year play caller be the person for this team initially. Fourth down, y'all, and the last question. So I'm starting to get a little bit worried about cornerback too. So Dax Hill didn't work out at safety. So they're going to move him to cornerback as one of the outside corners. He's not going to play the slot because there's already got a gang of slot receivers, Mike Hilton being the first one, and then Jalen Davis being the one backing him up. So he'd be the third slot. That's not going to work. So they're going to move him to outside corner. And so now who is your number 2 corner behind Cam Taylor, Britt? DJ Turner was the guy that was there last year, and he did well early in the season from camp to mini camp. Like he did really, really well. But then, he either hit the rookie wall or something. And it's always concerning with me when you have corners his size anyway, even if he can run with people, with a taller wide receiver, it's always going to be an issue because he can get, shacked or jump balled or whatever because he's just so small. But is it DJ Turner? Is it Dax Hill? Dax Hill has elite level athleticism. Maybe he can make that transition to being a border corner. He can tackle, so you don't have to worry about him if runs get out to wide over there. He can come up and make tackles, but can he adjust, run, cover, read, push towards zones, like all of those things that a border corner has to do? you know, I'm a little bit concerned about that. And you really have to worry if his confidence has gotten shook a little bit. Under normal circumstances, anybody's confidence would be shooken and shaken in this situation. You drafted to be this person, you sat for a year learning behind somebody, that person leaves, takes big money. All right, you're the man. And you didn't really do that well. Although I would say he had a DJ Turner like existence too, is that he was okay at the start and then it just fell apart at the end. And you could tell his confidence was gone. Hopefully he can get that back. So Dax, DJ Turner, maybe rookie Josh Newton, he showed up at practice the other day and, bump and run Chad. Okay, Chad's also close to a 50-year-old man at this point. So I don't know if that's as impressive as we thought is, but, maybe a corner out there or a rookie cornerback there, or maybe it's an unsigned veteran. Maybe there's a veteran out there, the Xavier Howards of the world, which definitely won't be him because he's a terrible guy in person, and the Bengals wouldn't bring that into their locker room. But is there a veteran corner out there that they might look to sign that could come in and, even if they're not starting, they can take, a few of these snaps away from these, kind of untested rookie and Dax Hill at cornerback, second year player, and DJ Turner, like to kind of try to help them transition into the season, because that cornerback position is very important. Because say what you will about Cam Taylor Britt, he's gotten better every year. And I would say that had he not gotten injured this past season, he probably would have been a borderline Pro Bowler. So there's there's the expectation that he's going to be better this coming season as well, and it's going to be a big deal for the Bengals. Last year's defense, everybody ran all over them. They didn't really have to throw it because they could run for 200 yards a game. Obviously, the Bengals addressed that situation, so now you're going to be stout, not just in the middle of the field against the run, but need to be stout outside at your cornerbacks positions and your safety positions now too. So hopefully that communication will be better now that Von Bell is back, and the Bengals quarterback room doesn't fall apart like it did at the end of the season last year. So that's it, y'all. 4 questions moving into the off season. We'll be back next week again after this next round of mandatory or at least mini camp practices and OTAs. Hopefully everybody stays healthy. That's really the best thing that you can hope for in this situation, that everybody stays healthy. There are no setbacks with injuries, primarily with Joe Burrow. And that's it. All right. So remember, you can find us on SoundCloud, iTunes. No more Stitcher, y'all. Google Play, rate, review, subscribe if you're on the YouTube channel. We appreciate y'all. Hoo day, everybody. Peace.